I have two siblings that I consider to be kind of like chronic liars. And I think that what led them to that coping method is the same thing that led me to be a long winded over explainer. This is kind of a part two from my last TikTok. In that one, I went over more of my side of things. I do think that neurodivergence is an element of this for me, but I also think some of it stems from growing up in a family where the adults just don't give kids the benefit of the doubt and just kind of seem to have this view that like they're smarter and wiser and older, and so they can just assume everything and know all of the details by observing, and that kids just kind of need to fall in line. So I used the somewhat made up example of if they're upset that a light was left on, if you are the kid kind of closest to that room, they might just assume you must have been in that room recently and you're the one who left that light on. And then if you try to tell them that it wasn't you, or maybe just to explain why you left the light on when they asked you why you didn't turn the light off, either of those responses is going to make them really mad. If you explain, they're going to see that as you taking or you making excuses or you talking back. Or if you say it wasn't you, they're going to then think you're lying and just trying to not take accountability for your misdeed, even if you really didn't do it. Like they're just not going to believe you if they think that you did it. And to me, that felt like a trap. And it felt like there was no right answer, because if I really didn't leave the light on, I felt like I can't just say that I did leave it on and apologize, because I didn't, and lying is bad. And then on the other side, I can't explain myself because they're going to think I'm back talking. My own view of myself, like the fact that I knew I didn't leave the light on just to run up the electricity bill, doesn't really matter. And part of me wants to say they don't care if you did it or not, but I don't think from their perspective that's really true. I think it's that they just really are convinced it was you, and so they just aren't going to believe anything else. But from the kid perspective, it feels like they don't want the truth. They want me to be the bad guy. I believe that some of my siblings coped with that by lying. And I think that can kind of make sense. If a kid feels like I'm sure they felt as cornered as I did, and you're kind of getting signals from the parent that they don't care about the truth, or yeah, that's how it feels. It feels like they don't care about the truth. And that they just want you to agree with what they're saying, regardless of whether you know it to be true or not. So that kind of gives you the message that, like, lying is okay, because if I lie in this scenario, it's going to make them less mad at me, right? But also, I can see how a kid can just get the message that if your parent isn't willing to hear out your version of events, to hear and respect your truth, then authenticity doesn't matter very much. And so if authenticity doesn't matter, if honesty doesn't matter, then why not lie? I was sharing this like kind of theory I've developed about maybe this is why a couple of my siblings lie a lot about things that really don't seem to matter. And of course, my therapist is my therapist. My therapist is not my sibling's therapist, so they can't like tell me why my siblings are the way they are, of course. But they did share that they thought that theory made sense because people do develop different coping methods as kids for protective reasons. And we often see the world based on our childhood environment. So if a kid were to learn that lying makes things easier for me sometimes, then they would continue to hold that belief into adulthood, potentially. And also, if authenticity doesn't matter, or maybe even is really not wanted in my family of origin, then maybe being my authentic self is bad in adulthood and in other social scenarios as well. They also raised the idea that while from the outside perspective, it might seem to me like somebody is lying when there is no stakes because there is no threat. So why would they have to defend themselves by lying? That doesn't mean that they aren't perceiving a threat, because anybody who has trauma has the potential to have perception issues, because we tend to kind of project our traumas onto our current day lives, even if that isn't accurate. I certainly do this. I am prone to fawning anytime anybody is angry. And it doesn't have to be big anger. It can be like irritation, frustration. I still am often kicked into a fawn response. And the reality is that I'm a grown woman, and somebody being a little irritated isn't a threat to me, usually whatsoever. But even if it is a threat to me, it's usually going to be like a mild threat. It's going to be like a social threat, not like a physical threat, right? But my nervous system doesn't understand that most of the time. And so I see how my perceptions are skewed because of my trauma. And so it totally makes sense to me that somebody else might be perceiving threat in a social situation and feel the need to lie even when I'm watching this and seeing there's no threat there. I don't say any of this to like defend people who chronically lie. I think it's obviously a not great coping skill in a lot of situations. It certainly could lead to a really hard time making authentic connections and other like social problems. So, you know, um, but I do just find it interesting. And I also found it validating because I know that I tend to compare myself to my siblings. And when I seem to struggle with something that they don't, I wonder, well, then is it really just a me problem? Because if we went through the same things and they aren't struggling in this exact way, then maybe it's a me problem. But I think it makes sense that different kids, for whatever reason, whether it's like an inborn like genetic difference or a difference of what age they were when certain things happened or whatever else, might still have problems from the same cause, but it could just look very different. So in a way, it was validating to me, to this sense that like I have trauma related to not being believed and to kind of feeling cornered and questioned and not being given the benefit of the doubt. And I kind of think my siblings probably have that too, and it just shows up in ways that don't mirror my coping methods.